Velkommen til Vestkast episode 29. Denne episoden har vi kalt «Kom mai du skjønne milde». Denne episoden skal handle litt om festival. Vi skal snakke selvfølgelig mer om Bergen Craft Beer Fest, som nå litt over en uke unna. Vi har fått en prat med Wolfgang Lindell, som bryggerimester på Dahls Bryggerier i Trondheim. Han snakker selvfølgelig litt om bryggeriet sitt og om ølene sine, men også litt om malt og litt om gjær. Og til slutt skal vi snakke med Bjørn, Ivar, Johnsen, som styrer festivalen mot alle odds, nemlig Smaabrygg i Flekkefjord, som tegner til å bli den største hjemmebryggerfestivalen i Norge utenom Nordbrygg sine arrangementer. Vestkast støttet av Vestbrygg, vår faste leverandør av utstyr og råvarer til hjemmebrygging, og av Pingvinen, vår faste leverandør av godt håndverksøl og god håndverksmat i Bergen, og Bergen Craft Beer Fest, Bergens første internasjonale ølfestival 19. og 20. mai. Da det på tide å snakke om Bergen Craft Beer Fest igjen, og nå bookingansvarlig Helge så opptatt i og med at det bare en uke igjen, så vi har fått fatt i en mann som enda mer opptatt, nemlig festivalsjef Oskar Leigulen.
Jo, hei. Kjekt å få være med.
Ja, det knapt en uke igjen nå. Hvordan står det?
Jo, vi merker jo det at folk har vært med og arrangert litt festivaler før og vært på en del festivaler, så vi har tenkt på det meste, men det ikke alle punkt som har blitt landet enda, så nå det litt panisk innspurt med alt som vi har tenkt at vi skulle gjøre, men ikke nødvendigvis har fått på plass. Så det bestilling av koblinger til fat, og det bestilling av posters, og det å følge opp alle leveransene av øl fra hele verden, og sørge for at vi har hotellrom til alle de bryggerne som kommer på besøk.
Ja, det endelige antallet bryggerier ble nå 30, ble det det?
Det endelige antall ble 30, ja.
Og derav 5 norske?
Ja, og så ett fra Bergen.
Ja, riktig. Ja, det teller jo ikke.
Nei, så...
Men får du tid til å tenke på øl, eller tenker du kun på logistikk?
Jeg har nok lite fokus på selve ølet, men mest fokus på selve organiseringen. Men jeg får nå hatt litt tanker om en gang iblant, og det jo umulig å ikke få med seg alt det morsomme som kommer på grunn av alle de folka som har rundt seg, som brenner for øl.
Ja, skal vi bare rekapitulere kjapt hvordan dette her egentlig kom i gang? Du jobber jo også i dag i Bergen Ølfestival.
Ja, vanligvis så har jeg en rolle der i form av at jeg er ansvarlig for å få rigget opp festivalen og selve organiseringen rundt området på Bergen Ølfestival.
Ja, hvordan endte vi opp med en internasjonal festival?
Det jo, Bergen Ølfestival har jo hatt lyst til å ha besøk av internasjonale bryggeri, og Sjufjell har hatt litt tanker om å starte sin egen internasjonale festival, og vi kom i snakk rundt det, og fant ut at dette var noe vi kunne samarbeide om, og dermed så hadde vi Bergen Craft Beer Fest.
Ja, det sånn da at infrastrukturen står Bergen Ølfestival for, og kontaktnettverket står Sjufjell for?
Sjufjell det som jeg har ansvaret for å få inn ølet og kontaktnettverket opp imot de selve bryggeriene, mens gjennomføringen av selve festivalen det Bergen Ølfestival som står for og drar på de vekslene vi har hatt ifra å ha både Bergen Ølfestival og den tette sammenhengen mellom Bergen Ølfestival og Nattjazz.
Ja.
Så Nattjazz har jo veldig mange dyktige organisatorer som driver fulltid med å organisere festivaler, og noen av dem heldigvis villige til å være med og hjelpe oss.
Øl og jazz, det jo logisk.
Det en god kombinasjon.
Hvis du skulle plukket deg ut 3 bryggerier som du har lyst til så du gleder deg til å smake på under festivalen, hvilke 3 ville det vært?
Ja, der jo det at IKT kommer med en del råøl som nok så nytt for meg, så det gleder jeg meg veldig til å prøve.
De kommer vel ikke bare med en del, de kommer vel egentlig bare med råøl.
De kommer med kun råøl.
Ja.
Og Pojala fra Estland kan bli spennende.
Ja.
Og der jo for eksempel Vat og Vento Forte, bryggeri som jeg gleder meg. Vento Forte har jo fått veldig gode veldig gode karakterer for IPA-en sin spesielt, så han kommer jo da med mange forskjellige IPA. Så det blir morsomt.
Absolutt et av Helge sine favorittbryggeri også, så vidt jeg har skjønt.
Ja, han snakker veldig positivt om Vento Forte, og mye om det, definitivt. Så hvis du nevner deg, så han i godt humør.
Hva skjer da altså på selve festivalen? Vi kommer altså ned på verftet, en nedlagt sardinfabrikk nå, kulturhus på Nordnes i Bergen.
Ja, og der jo da et utstillingslokale, eller et glassbur utenfor inngangspartiet, der vi kommer til å ha både utdeling av armbånd, som det som kreves for å komme inn på de forskjellige sesjonene, samt at det blir mulighet for å kjøpe billetter til sesjonene og dagspass og også weekendpass i det buret. Men selvfølgelig, vi setter jo pris på at folk kjøper i forkant, så vi vet vi har dimensjonert alt for den mengden mennesker som kommer, og ja.
Det billetter igjen, altså?
Der fortsatt litt billetter igjen, så det bare å løpe og kjøpe. En finner link til billettsalg fra websidene våre, og fra Facebook, der en kan søke opp Bergen Craft Beer Fest.
Og etter hvert på Vestkast sin hjemmeside.
Supert.
Så det altså to sesjoner på fredag?
Det det 2 sesjoner på fredag. Første begynner klokka 12, og så har vi den varer da til klokka 4. Og så har vi en 2 timers pause der folk får hentet seg litt mat og frisker seg opp igjen litt grann, før vi kjører en ny sesjon på kveldingen da, fra klokka 6 til klokka 10. Og da det jo, de fleste bryggerier har jo da byttet ut de øler de hadde, med noen nye, mens noen samme ølen videre. Men de fleste vil ha nye øl på tapp da.
Og så det samme, så det på'n igjen på lørdag.
Så det på'n igjen på lørdag, og da blir det enda mer spennende øl, og ja, det blir artig, jeg gleder meg veldig.
Og det stort sett bryggerne selv som kommer fra de forskjellige bryggeriene?
Ja, bryggere eller folk som jobber i produksjon og har god kjennskap til prosessen og hvordan de forskjellige bryggerier driver.
Så det vil bli råd å slå av en prat underveis?
Ja, vi prøver å avlaste bryggerne, og de fleste minst 2 stykker, så det skal være mulig å få trådt av en prat med de som der. Det vil også være i pausen mellom sesjonene, så prøver vi å ha bakgården åpen, der det mulighet for å få matservering, og kanskje der også blir litt pauseinnslag.
Ja. Så det gjenstår jo bare å se om du i det hele tatt får sjanse til å smake på noe som helst under festivalen der.
Det vel det som mest tvilsomt, men forhåpentligvis så det litt grann rester, eller kanskje ikke forhåpentligvis, men hvis det det, så får jeg kanskje smake på deg.
Så du offrer deg for at vi andre ølnerder kan gå rundt og kose oss?
Ja, det et offer som ikke så vanskelig å ta. Det jo en belønning i seg selv å se at folk koser seg på en festival som en har vært med og arrangert og lagt ned mye krefter og innsats i, så det jo å håpe at alle ølnerder støtter opp under og får med seg flest mulig til festivalen, så det går bra, og vi får arrangert en enda bedre festival til neste år. For det jo et håp om at det her skal være en gjentagende festival.
Da må jeg bare si lykke til, Oskar.
Tusen takk. Jeg håper jeg ser flest mulig av Vestkast sine lyttere på festivalen.
So, I wanted to know, like, if you could tell a little bit about your background and how you ended up in Dahls and all this, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So, basically, I've been here. We opened the brewery in August. That's when we opened the doors to the public. Of course, we had our first equipment commissioning going on before then. So the first brew was actually April 23rd of 2016 of last year. And I was here for that. So I've been in Trondheim a little bit, I guess, from last spring. So about a year now. And I moved here with my family. I was living previously in Copenhagen. I was working with Carlsberg. R&D, research and development, basically designing recipes and working a lot with Jacobsen brewery. I don't know if you know them. That's the premier craft brewery in Denmark from Carlsberg.
Yeah.
So I was doing that for 5 years. And before that, I was I was the brewmaster at a small craft brewery in Puerto Rico, which is in the Caribbean. I was there for 3 years, running the brewery, doing both American and European style beers. So, IPAs, brown ales, but also European continental lagers and so on. And before that, I was brewing in Germany. So I'm actually a German-trained brewmaster. I was brewing, then I went also to brew school, became a brewmaster. Eventually was the second brewmaster, we call it. So the head brewmaster, and then in this case, I was his right hand at one of Germany's largest brew pubs. It's in Munich Airport. It's called Airbräu. And I was there for several years, and then until the opportunity in Puerto Rico opened up to be number one first brewmaster. So then that's why I moved to Puerto Rico. And before that, going back further in time, I was working in many breweries throughout Germany, bigger and smaller. And before that, I'm actually from the U.S. I grew up in Montana in the Northwest. I'm the name Wolfgang. I'm half German, half American. But yeah, that's my story in a nutshell. If you want to know anything more.
Dahls, what is Dahls? Is it a craft brewery or is it an industrial brewery on the Carlsberg, or what is it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there might be some confusion about it because we were an industrial brewery, and it all gets down to how you define craft beer. And I guess we have a lot of time, so we could spend a lot of time just talking on that subject. I have definitely done that before. I'm sure you have also.
Oh, yes.
But before, it was only the Dahls. Dahls Pilsner was produced here. I mean, the brewery has been here since 1856, so it has a long and proud history. But over the years, as things consolidated, the history is known. It eventually, first it was part of, I think, Orkla, and then part of the Carlsberg Group. At its heyday, there were over 1 million hectoliters of beverages being produced here. Also cola van and so on. But that all got shifted down to Gjelleråsen, to the new Ringnes plant there. And then it was only a matter of time until this brewery would shut down. However, Dahls Pils was still being produced here. And then it was really only a matter of time, but then the people rose up. This is really a classic example of the people saving the brewery. And it was basically not really, it would have been like a revolution had it been closed. At the same time, Brooklyn was looking for another project. So Brooklyn Brewery from New York, which is like the number 10 largest craft brewery in the U.S., they had already started a successful project in Stockholm as a joint venture with Carlsberg, Sweden. It's called New Carnegie Bryggeriet. Some of you may, I don't know if you've been there, Rolf, but some of the listeners may have been there. And that opened about 2 or 3 years ago. And that was very successful. Brooklyn loves Scandinavia. Garrett is here all the time. He had been here anyway, doing different beer and food events in Trondheim and throughout Norway. And then this opportunity somehow became available. So it was like the best of both worlds. The brewery was saved. Brooklyn was able to add another brewery in this joint venture. And now we are a different entity. So to be clear, we are not Carlsberg. We are a joint venture with Carlsberg and with Brooklyn Brewery. So that means, what does that mean? It means we're on paper, we're a different legal entity. So I have, different contracts and all this. And then if you ask us the question, are we a craft brewery? Well, that's the special case about us. And that's why a lot of people are looking at our model, because we brew both what I would call craft beer, which is, genuine like IPAs and saisons and so on, but we also still brew Dahls. So there may be some confusion. We brew Dahls here. It's also public knowledge that some of the Dahls is also brewed in Oslo, but that's only the Dahls that's in cans. Mm-hmm. So all bottled Dahls, all Dahls you can buy on the tap, fat öl, that's all coming from here. Mm-hmm. it's only we don't have a canning line, so the canned Dahls is produced in Oslo.
Mm-hmm.
So we brew the Dahls here, and then we brew craft beers. So if you want to split it into two, my answer is that we do both. However, I have a long-term project to turn basically our flagship Dahls Pilsner also into a craft Pilsner. And then it really gets down to the definition on what do you mean by craft, and so on and so forth. So
we can talk forever about that.
Yeah, for sure.
But could you talk a little bit more about the beers you are making and how you see them and what is your approach to beers?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we're brewing what people in this area drink, and that's Dahls. So, first of all, if you grow up in Trondheim, Dahls is a part of you. And so we brew a lot of Dahls. So over 50% of what we brew is Dahls Pilsner. That's what. But now we've launched these new beers. So when we opened in August, we launched 3 beers shortly thereafter in Vinmonopol, and those are Bold IPA. That's a 6.9% American style India Pale Ale. At the same time, we launched Pepper Saison. That's a 6.5% ABV Saison, brewed with white pepper and hyssop. And then we also launched Lamo Wit. It's a wit beer, which is 5.2%. Those are the 3 that we initially launched in August. However, just 2 weeks ago, we launched 3 more supermarket beers. So those are 4.6%. And they're all kind of modern in the terms of, when I say modern, like a modern lager. So it's a hoppier lager. It's a lager that's dry hopped at 4.6. It's called 500 Lager. We've also launched Reina Saison, which is a Saison, but at 4.6. And that is actually dry hopped, so it's kind of a modern version of a Saison. Mm-hmm. And then we've also launched an IPA, a session IPA at 4.6, which we call York IPA. So already now we have 6 available. Those are distributed all over Norway. That's distributed. You can get those from anywhere in Norway. Mm. So that's what we brew the most of. Those 6 plus the Dahls Pils. And then for this area only, or around the brewery, we have what we call beta beers. And those are our experimental beers that we do like one batch at a time, which is 5,000 liters. We can go down to 3,000 liters. It's a 50 hectoliter brew house. And those are available out around in town. Whoever has an extra tap handle can request some kegs and pick them up here. But we don't distribute them. So if you're in Arendal, it's hard to get a keg of our Skatval smoked, quadruple, but you can get it here. There's a few places that actually want them so bad that they pull them for they somehow get them like through contacts, or we do distribute some beers down to Oslo for the other beers that you can get all over Norway, and then we can put a couple of kegs of those onto. For like Café Sada in Oslo and some of the other bars, I believe also in Bergen and Stavanger, we've had them there also. So, And those are fun because those, I mean, all the beers are fun, but those are specifically exciting because, we brew them as an experiment or one time and then we see if people like them, we'll brew them again. If not, we won't brew them again. We just started this new concept. It's basically what we call the brewers of the round table. Mm-hmm. So, it's not just me. Obviously, there's a team of 10 of us. So there's nine Norwegians behind me, and then me, which is also good to have an American in terms of, because we're also a part American company. And so when we do this brewers of the round table, we all sit around the table. We meet every day anyway when we have our shift turnover and so on. We have 2 shifts. But then we take a little longer time and we beforehand. And then those that want to, we know we will brew another beer, another beta beer. And then we make the pitch to each other. So Marius may stand up and say, yeah, I want to make a kettle sour, with this and this and this. and he does whatever. He may have brought some samples from his home brew in or whatever. And then the next person makes the pitch, and we kind of go around. Not everybody has to, it's just the people who want to. But then we vote, and you cannot vote for your own ideas, so you can only vote for others. And then whichever one wins, then that's the next beta. And we've just started this, and we already have a candidate. It will be a beer we'll be brewing in the next month or so. That's from Bente Otnes, and we're excited about that. So yeah, that's the exciting thing about these beta beers. It's more experimental and changing all the time, and it's also exciting, hopefully, for the people that come to the places where you have these the different beers all the time.
So that's your little playground then.
Yeah, basically it is, but it's a 5,000 liter playground, which is still kind of, we don't have a smaller brewery, which, I mean, it was a big investment. Almost the whole brewery is new. I mean, obviously we've been around since 1856, but just to give you further background, the big brewery, it was 10 times bigger. That was in operation from the early 80s until March of last year. And that was brewing around 500 hectoliter per batch, which is 50,000 liters. And that was then shut in March. And then this whole new brew house was installed. And I would say 95% of it is new. So it's equipment from Germany, from a company called Braukon. The building was totally refurbished. It was a 110 million krona project, big project with a lot of new things being put in and so on. We recycled a few things, just like our yeast storage vessels and a couple of small pumps and so on. But most of the equipment is new. But one of the things we didn't have is a small pilot. So our pilot is our main brewery, and the smallest we can brew in there is 3,000 liters. So yeah.
Yeah, about yeast. You still keep your own host yeast for the lagers.
Absolutely, and it's a real pleasure to be able to use that yeast. That yeast is the reason Dahls tastes the way that it does, and the reason that it still has flavor and is unique. When I was in Copenhagen, I sat next to Håkon, who's a Norwegian guy, but he studied here in Trondheim. And when he heard I was coming here to Trondheim, he would tell me, like, he still remembers the taste of it, because, if you go to university here, not just if you grow up here, but if you come from outside of Trondheim and go to university or whatever, you get to know the flavor, and it's a very unique flavor. And there's a lot to be said for that, because one of the reasons, like you probably know, about this whole craft beer revolution or renaissance or whatever you call it, was that a lot of beers lost their individuality. They became more and more boring, more and more the same. At least that's what happened in my country, in the US, until there was a revolution, or as Garrett Oliver calls it also now, a renaissance, back to the way it used to be before. Now there's suddenly more styles and more variation and more taste. But up until then, things were getting more consolidated. And that's the nice thing about Dahls, because the yeast is from the 1940s. Comes from the Alfred Jorgensen laboratories, and it's unique. If you ask a modern, like, let's say Carlsberg, who, brewing around the world, 4th largest brewery group, they would not use that yeast because it's too complex. It doesn't work as fast. It doesn't fall out of solution as fast. It doesn't break down diacetyl as fast. It's there are more efficient yeasts, but in terms of, there also may be more. And if everybody's brewing with the same yeast, then you also get kind of a, it gets kind of boring, because all the beers start to taste the same. So luckily we're not. So we're really proud that we can do that. And this is the great thing for me to work here after 5 years at Carlsberg, because I was getting a little bit fed up with all the corporate stuff. There's nothing, I don't want to be anti-corporate, because they have recognized the value of craft, and that there is something happening, and Carlsberg is alone, and in the big companies, they are brewing companies, they're also giving money back to science with the Carlsberg Foundation. They have a lot of professors working on top level science. So they're they are doing things that aren't traditional corporations do. But on the other hand, a corporation also has obligations for pension funds and everything else, and they also look at bottom lines, and in this case, luckily, we don't have to do that here. We are like I mentioned, a different legal entity, so we can make chili chipotle chocolate porter beers that are would never be able to be made in Oslo or somewhere, and it takes a lot of work. We can double ferment, we can do things like that, and that's a beautiful thing to be in a place at a brewery like that for a brewer. So all of us brewers, we're really fortunate that it's like this. And again, it's Trondheim that saved the brewery. That it was because people really love beer here. We're not the only brewery, there's a couple other breweries in town, and I think that's good also. It would be boring if we were only one brewery. And it's really like a mecca for home brewers here too. We just had the home brewers conference. That's where I met you. We had another event just last week at the Radisson that was sponsored by Gulating and people, and that was on Tuesday. An event. It was on Tuesday right after Easter vacation, and the place was packed. It was sold out. You could not get a ticket. It was like 400 people, and the tickets cost some money on a Tuesday evening after vacation, and it was packed, and it was all people coming to a beer festival or a beer to try different beers from different brewers, whoever was here. I mean, most of the Norwegian breweries were here for that. And again, that just shows there's so much happening. We had the Brewers Conference, then we had the Home Brewers Conference, then we had this beer festival, all like in the last month. Then we have other things coming up, as you know. So there's a lot of stuff happening in this area, and that's why it's really great to be in it as a brewery in Trondheim.
Yeah, at the homebrew conference, you were giving out small vials of the local yeast.
Yes,
yes. Yeah, and a lot of us beer geeks in a certain age, we remember very well the Lysholma Special. That I think I discovered that one in late 80s, and I really have this thing about this beer because I want. So when I got the beer, I was really eager to try to brew it at home. A copy of the Lysholma Special. Is there any tips or hints that you can give to how to get it right?
I wish I could, but I have not brewed that beer, and I didn't grow up drinking that beer, so I don't really know. I would obviously do some research. Maybe there are some clone recipes out there, or maybe talk to some of the old brewers who were here, who were actually brewing it. So I can talk with some of my team who know maybe more about it. We have about half of the team, like I mentioned, there's 10 of us. About half of them have been here for very many years. So we have some people who started in the early 80s, and so they might know. I can ask Christian, our ambassador. He probably knows the history, but he's not a brewer. But I can research that. Roger, he's also a trained brewmaster. There's two of us, myself and Roger, and he is also an avid home brewer who knows a lot about the history. So he might have some information. You might have met him. He also gave a presentation on Saturday morning.
Yeah,
Friday morning.
Yeah, I think that's another podcast episode, brewing lager beers with Dahls. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we know how to brew lager beers. That's for sure.
That's for sure. Yeah, but okay. Do you have any contact and do you work with the other breweries in the area, like Austman and those?
Well, as you know, I don't know how. I mean, I will say it how, because you may not know. We started an initiative, and it was really important to Brooklyn, and part of our charter, basically, to kind of work together in the community. So the way it works in the U.S., you're probably familiar, is that it's a really there's a lot of camaraderie between different breweries in craft beer. I'm talking about the U.S. craft beer community. So it's quite well known that people help each other out. There have lately been a few cases of people suing each other because of names and so on, but those players usually get a big black eye, and then people don't, what goes around comes around, and then people don't want to work with them and stuff. And if you go like where I was brewing in Germany, once I became a master brewer, I was also invited to these once a month. We had a Braumeister Stammtisch Sektion Südbayern, where this was southern Bavaria, where all the brewmasters from the different breweries would meet once a month at a different brewery. So these are, people that you're sort of competing against each other, but you're still colleagues. And you're proud to have your colleagues visit your brewery, and you sit together, you have a meal, you socialize, of course you have beers. And then the next month it's at somebody else's, and you get to know each other. And so it was really important for Brooklyn to kind of foster this, and for me also. I'm a big believer in that. I remember when I first got to Carlsberg, I had wanted to do something with a collaboration with one of the breweries in southern Germany where I had been working, called Privatbrauerei Höpfner. And they, in the meantime, are like 50% Heineken, and everybody were like in shock that I was even asking, and I was in shock that they were in shock, and it was just a collaboration. This is what everybody is doing, and it's a win-win for everybody in terms of ideas exchange and so on. Those that don't believe that, it's like the old-fashioned thinking, what's happening like in my country nowadays. But so what we did, just I guess it was beginning of April. We did the first. It was 6 and 7 April, what we call the Norwegian Brewers Technical Conference. We hosted that here at EC Dahls, and we invited all Norwegian breweries. And we got the list from Brod, from the Brewers Association of Norway, and we did this together with the Norsk Bryggerlag, and we had over 30 breweries. I'm happy to say it was just kind of short notice, but we had over 30 breweries, and most of the major breweries were here. I mean, like Kinn was here, Hansa, Nøgnø, Ausmann, of course, all the local breweries from around town, but also from outside of town, from Røros, from Oslo, also small farmhouse breweries. And we had over 30 breweries, and it was really just the brewers talking with each other. And the way Garrett put it also, we invited everybody together, Garrett and myself, and he put it nicely. He said, look, it doesn't matter if you brew 2 liters or 200 hectoliters. If you brew beer and make a living by brewing beer, then you're welcome here. And so we had over 30 breweries and like 70 different brewers represented, and it was a lot of fun. And we had different presentations, technical presentations. So I think, to answer your question, that is part of, for sure, we're working with other breweries. What we've done in terms of collaborations with specific breweries, we brewed one collaboration with Øks. That's the brew pub downtown. I don't know if you know it. It's a great brew pub below Fratis. It's a restaurant, but it's a brew pub, and their brewmaster Ulrich and I, we collaborated together, and we made a beer called Miraculix. It was what we call a triple bock, and that was one collaboration. Then we did another one recently with Roar Sandoden, who is together with, he's doing a lot of his own malt. He calls himself a biologist, but I also call him a maltster. He really is a maltster. He makes Stjørdal malt, and it's a great product and also very full of tradition. So we did a collaboration brew together. We came up with the recipe together, and we brewed that here at our brewery. And that beer is available all over Trondheim, and also in a few places outside, like Kaffesada, I believe. What other collaborations have we done? We're always. I mean, we will do more. So this is just the beginning. Keep in mind, we've only been open since August. So.
Yeah, I just remember there was a brewer I talked to, and he's put it this way: if your neighbor starts brewing, you have 2 options: either kill him or help him. The plan for this talk was actually to talk about malts, because you're reckoned as one of the brewers in Norway that know most about malts.
I mean, part of my education, the way the German education of brewers is set up is that it's a very traditional setup the way it has been done for hundreds of years. They also have a bryggerlag, and so on. And it was traditional. If you studied to be a brewmaster, you're also studying to be a maltmeister. So it's Brauer und Melzer. Mm-hmm. You're a brewer and a maltster. Because in the old days, every brewery had to made their own malt. If you really go far back enough, first of all, every restaurant made their own beer, or every house pretty much almost every house made their own beer, but also then every brewery made their own malt. And then that's slowly consolidated, with the Industrial Revolution and so on. But some of those traditions stayed. So a lot of my education was also in malt. But I have worked in a malting. It's one of the hardest jobs I've ever done. Harvest season in maltings in southern Germany. But I haven't worked with malt in a malting for many, many years. But of course, we're looking at malt almost every day. I have malt dust all over me right now because we had to unclog some. So we're always buying malt. We're looking at the numbers, and that's what some of the things I tried to impart in the speech was about how to select your malt and so on.
Mm. Yeah, if you talk about the malts that you're using and why are you choosing the malts you do?
Yeah, so that we could talk a lot about that. Of course, there's different kind of malts. So, but most brewers use barley malt. I'm assuming that you and anybody listening knows enough about beer that I don't need to go into the reasons why. But yeah, we're using barley malt. But the thing is, we're also, remember, it's all new equipment, but it's based on kind of a German craft brewing setup. By that I mean with like the modern way of malting or of brewing, for example, in big breweries is for example, using mash filters, which they don't even use a lauter tun in some breweries. And there's even a new setup now that I saw that was advertised at the last convention. That's every year in Germany in Nuremberg there's a big the Mess convention, a brewers convention, and they just premiered a new way again to kind of a new way to separate your wort and your spent grain without using a lauter tun. So there's always been some other ways to do it, but the traditional way to do it was with a lauter tun or a lauter bottich. Mm. And we are set up that way. Our brewery has a lauter tun, and we don't have a wet mill. So our mill is a traditional 6-roll mill. So it's 3 pairs of cylinders that are crushing the malt, and it's dry malt. And just to give you an example, before the brewery before, it was 10 times bigger, and it was, when it was built in the early 80s, it was the most modern in Scandinavia at the time. And they had a wet roller mill, or a conditioning mill, and that means that the malt, you get it wet, a small amount of water to make it elastic, and then you just squeeze the corn and squeeze the endosperm out and keep the husk intact. And there's a lot of advantages for that, of course, because that helps your separation later, and you get the most extract. But then you have advantages that it doesn't really, the quality of the malt is not as important in terms of the different sizes and homogeneity and so on. But for a traditional dry mill like ours is, it does make a difference, especially if we're not using enzymes. And I'm really trying not to use enzymes. Of course, the reason you make malt is to make enzymes, to liberate the enzymes or to create the enzymes from the malt kernel. But a lot of breweries are also adding enzymes because it speeds up the process, and it's much easier. And then those are exogenous enzymes. You buy a big canister of enzymes, and then you add those into your mash. And then you have no problem with filtering later or with separating in the lauter tun. But then you're dependent on getting the enzymes. It's a little bit more processed. Where do they come from, etc. There's nothing wrong with that. In the end, an enzyme is an enzyme. But I think it's just cooler to use the ones that are native in the barley itself, in the malt itself, and that's kind of, it's not that's the Reinheitsgebot way also, the German purity law, that you're not allowed to use enzymes. I'm not saying we never use enzymes. We have them here in the brewery. But before we used them more. And right now I can tell you without a fact, we have not used enzymes for 6 months. So, and I'm very happy with that. But because of that, you need to have really pay attention to the malt. And this is why I'm just answering what you asked earlier about that the quality of the malt is really important, because you need to guarantee certain parameters are met if you want to have an efficient runoff time in the lauter tun. So then it's really important for the quality of the malt. And I can go into that some more if you like.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so when we were commissioning the brewery, I've told this story also during the Homebrewers Conference and also during tours. But so when we were commissioning the brewery, the brew house, the equipment manufacturers guaranteed that we could do 8 brews in one day. That means 8 brews in 24 hours. That means 24 divided by 3, divided by 8 is 3. That means you would need to do 1 brew every 3 hours. And the most complex part of brewing in terms of in the brew house is the separation of the spent grain from the wort that's in the lauter tun. That's the rate determining step that determines the length of when you can brew again. So that step altogether in that vessel in the lauter tun has to be under 3 hours. That means from when you put the mash in to when you get rid of the spent grain and are ready to put the next mash in. That whole process has to be less than 3 hours, and that was what they guaranteed. That's what we spent all this money for, and it wasn't happening, and they were really starting to get worried. And so they even flew a specialist in for a mill specialist, a guy who's put together different mills, who was like 65 years old, and who was like a real master mill person. And he was looking at it, and in the end, it came down to that it was the raw ingredients themselves. The malt itself was not the right quality because it was not homogeneous enough. You had too many small kernels in there, or too many large ones. And let's say if you have too many small ones, when it goes through, if you adjust your mill spacing such that if you open it so you don't get too much flour, meal, then you get too much, your efficiency goes way down. But if you tighten it, then the small ones, you will get way too much meal, and then you're stuck in the lauter tun for much longer than 3 hours. And the German way, when you buy malt from a German maltster, if you do it, without enzymes and everything, then there are guaranteed, or there are recommended numbers and parameters that you should stay in within. Like, the size should be between, you take a fraction of the malt that you get, and it shouldn't be less than 2% of outputs, or a certain fraction between 2.5 millimeters and 2.8, and so on. And that if you get outside of those parameters, then you're going to have problems, and that's what was happening to us. So then it turned out that it was the malt, and I won't say what supplier it was, but then we went to them and said, look, we found out that we need some better malt. Give us your best shot. But we went to 3 different suppliers, and we said, look, we have an old-fashioned mill. By the way, our mill is from the 1950s. It's a brand new brewery, but the mill itself, it's completely refurbished. So new motor, new chain, everything. But the shell of the mill itself is from the 50s. It has its own history. It's really interesting. And we said, look, we have an old-fashioned mill that it's really important. We need the right parameters. Please use these parameters that we're using. It's kind of like EBC, which is the European Brewers Convention, but in Germany before Europe, they were using this MEBAC. It's called Mitteleuropäische Brauanalysenkonvention or something like that, and we were using that. And you can see the numbers there, and as long as the malt meets all these parameters, then then it should be okay. And we said, look, supply us with your best malt with these and these parameters. So if there's any brewers listening to, I mean, they know, or that you should always, check your malt. Of course, when you order malt, you have specifications that you can request, but then you can also check on it yourself, and that's also a whole nother story. It's also about, do you trust the supplier and so on. But it's good to do spot checks anyway. But so we got 3 different suppliers, and one of them, it was still over 3 hours. So by the way, that was the cheapest one. So it would have made sense to get that one. If we had enzymes, then maybe we could have gone with the cheaper route. The most expensive one was coming all the way from Germany, because it's so far away, and that one had good numbers. But the middle of the road one, it was in terms of price, it was still under 3 hours, and we chose them. And that malt is coming from Denmark, I can say. So right now we purchase a lot of malt. We're brewing. I would say in our peak. The plan is in our peak season, which is coming up now. Like this week, we are brewing 20 brews. But the plan is to brew about 24 brews a week. So we brew Monday through Friday, and we brew basically. We can brew up to 24 brews, I would say, in 1 week, and each brew is around 1 ton. So that's around 24 tons a week. And that's a lot of malt, and that malt has to come from somewhere, and it has to be the right quality, and so. And we're getting that from Denmark. We would love to use Norwegian malt. In fact, we've been in touch with this. There's a couple of. I mentioned this also during the homebrew talk, that there's a couple of small entrepreneurs who are setting up their own malting enterprises around Trøndelag. At least 2 that I know of. And we've actually, one of our beta beers, we brewed with that. It was called Storfosna. So I can mention Øyvind Christensen. He has a farm on the island of Storfosna, and he has been growing Domen barley, which is the heirloom variety that was grown around here, and he's been starting to malt it. He hasn't malted it himself there. He had it shipped away to Germany to get malted, but I think the plan is in the future to also malt it here. And then there's another guy, Tyson, who's been I've been talking with, who's really on the cusp of starting his own maltings. I think this autumn. And then also we've been in touch with there's a Norwegian malt cooperative who really want to do large quantities, and we've been talking with. So we would love to use 100%. Of course, the beer should be ideally made with the local ingredients, but there isn't that. When we're needing about 24 tons a week, there isn't that much Norwegian barley at this point to guarantee 24 tons every week. That's one big truck, a big bulk transport every week, and that there isn't that much. And then cost also becomes a factor, but it's not so much cost, because if we can't use 100% of it, we could use maybe, I don't know, we could buy in 1 year, let's say 100 tons or something, and then distribute it over the entire year's production. But at least we would be supporting local Norwegian farmers, 100 tons worth of local malt and barley. So we all hope that there is more and more of it. It seems like with the weather that's getting better and so on, that maybe there is a good chance that there'll be more and more local malt available.
So there is a future, you think, for Norwegian malts?
It seems like, I haven't lived here long enough, but it seems like from who I've been talking to, and also especially with this Norwegian malt collective, I don't know what they're called officially, but they've also been investigating for larger amounts. It seems like there is some stuff happening. And especially for craft beer, because for the beers that people are willing to spend a little more of course, if you do a smaller batch local barley and malt it, in a small scale, the costs of making it are much higher than making it in a big massive maltings in Denmark or France or Germany or whatever, or Sweden. But if you can do it in Sweden, I think you could do it here. But if you do it on a smaller scale, then per unit, the cost per ton of malt will be higher, and that will affect your the business case more if it's a tighter business case. And in the case of, for example, Dahls, that if you buy a Dahls, it costs less to buy a Dahls than it costs to buy a double India, a DIPA, double India Pale Ale, because it's hopped less and it's not as strong and so on. So, but then you have a larger business case to play with. So then you could afford maybe spending a little bit more on some of the ingredients. But when it's tighter, then it's harder. The numbers just don't add up. So, but there are options, and this is what I'm looking at in terms of maybe we couldn't use 100% Norwegian barley for our Dahls Pilsner, but maybe we could use a certain amount anyway. We're still supporting as much as we can the Norwegian farmers. So.
Talking about Norwegian ingredients, will you do anything with there's lots of talk about Kveik and Norwegian farmhouse ale. Are you planning doing anything in that direction?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. In fact, we talked about it at the Technical Brewers Conference with some of the brewers, and I was unfortunate. I could not listen to I know Lars Marius Grauhol was, I don't know if I pronounced his name right, but he was also giving a talk about some of the traditional methods, and there was also a yeast expert from NTNU. I missed both of those presentations during the conference because I was giving my own presentation during one of them, and the other speech was right before mine, and I was just finalizing my speech. So I missed both of those, unfortunately. But we cannot, it's not that we cannot, but we for sure want to use it just because of the tradition and the heritage that it's from here. We should celebrate the history from here, from Norway. And also because we want to experiment with it, and it's just cool, it's fun. And it seems to be cutting edge. So for both of those reasons, because of the past and the heritage, but also because of in terms of innovations and future parts, and to be honest, also because of fun, we will do it. So I guarantee you that one of our betas will be with Kveik for sure.
And junipers maybe as well.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that we have right now a beta that we are that's fermenting. It's not finished fermenting, but it will be launched in June, and that has junipers in it. And we have we have about, I don't know, 3 buckets full of einerbær, junipers, juniper berries, and we have no recipe, so we have to figure out how much to add. We're going to add it in the fermenter. We're also not sure how we're going to do it. So should we freeze it and then crush it, or add them whole, or whatever? But we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. I'm thinking not to go too much. If you talk with a lot of people, I had a great beer actually from Nøgne just the other day, which was, I think it was called Morsam or something. Or they have it was a supermarket beer, 4.6 from Nøgne. Can highly recommend it. It was brewed with juniper, a lot of juniper, but it's not so much that it's completely overpowering. And I think that's the thing with juniper. I have had some brews at some of the brewing festivals that are just too much juniper. So, have you brewed with juniper yourself?
No, but I brewed with spruce tips. That's quite interesting.
Ah, yeah. That's also something we would like to do. But yeah, that's.
Yeah, the season is now, so you have to run out and pick some.
Yeah, I know. We have to time all these things. I know there's a lot of things we want to do, and foraging and so on. But we don't have spruce tips in this one, but we do have some other exciting. We have juniper, but we also have some tinvet. So we're actually, it's on its way as we speak. It's a 7-hour drive. It should get here tomorrow. And we have to put it in the cooler, and then we're going to add it to the fermenter hopefully on Friday. So that beer will be. It should be an interesting beer. We don't have a recipe for it. We're just experimenting with it, and it's the first time. It's a true experimental beer, and you'll be able to get that all over Norway in June.
So we can expect a lot of interesting beers from Dahls in the future, yeah?
Yeah, that is our plan. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, I mean, the challenge is that we're also brewing a lot of our flagship Dahls Pilsner. It's a great thing to have. I mean, it's a great model because you're not dependent on, it's sort of a guaranteed income in terms of that, people will always be drinking Dahls. If you grow up with Dahls, you may go away, you want to try something, but then a lot of times you go back to it. I've seen this also in Germany or in the US. A lot of breweries have a flagship. And it can be different flagships. Sierra Nevada has a flagship, which is a pale ale. They also do many other beers, but people then come back to their Sierra Nevada pale ale. And in this case, our flagship is Dahls Pilsner. But we do 50 hectoliters at a time. That sounds like a lot. I mean, it is 5,000 liters. But, Trondelag is drinking a lot. So I would say, like I told you, we're this week brewing 20 brews. 16 of those this week, 16 of those are Dahls. So that means there's a lot of people drinking Dahls, and that means the other 4 then is what we can play with. So those are Saison that we're brewing in our Bolt, and we have to play around with that fermentation I mentioned to you. But that beer is already brewed, but we have to do some final touches. But I would love to do 100% experimentation, which would mean then you would have a lot more different beers. You will see. I mean, you already have 6 beers from us that are available all over Norway that are in the craft range, and there will be more. Then you have the beta beers, but we would love to do even more. But on the other hand, we also have to produce Dahls. So it's it's a good thing, and it's also a challenging thing. I'm not going to say it's a bad thing, but it's just the way it is. So it's an interesting model. When we explained it to the other brewers that were visiting us from the other, breweries from Norway, they were also really interested in how is it working, and and how the setup is. And yeah, it's a model. It has its advantages and it has its disadvantages. You could, if you didn't have to brew a flagship that everybody was drinking, then you could do more experimental stuff. But on the other hand, that allows you. If you have a guaranteed flagship, then that allows you to do experimental stuff. So I think it's a wise way to do it. But yeah, we would like to always have on the market 2 beta beers. The problem is if you're far away from Trondheim, how do you get those beta beers? Then all I can say is ask your favorite beer bar and try to get them to get it in. If there's enough pull, then maybe somebody will figure out a way to get it to your city or town or whatever. So Christian likes to say we should always have 2 beta beers available. Right now we actually have 3. So we have a Dunkel that we call a Bohemian Dunkel that we did together as a commemoration for Håkon Gullvåg. We had an art exhibit that you can still see now. And we made a Bohemian Dunkel. Then we have this Skatvarl, which is a quadruple, but it's not your typical quadruple because we use 20% Stjørdal malt. You might have tried that one at the homebrew conference.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And I really liked the Dunkel. That was beautiful.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's a pretty beer with the reddish melanodine colors. Yeah, really pretty. So we always try to have 2 at least, beta beers besides all the other beers available.
I see the time is running out now. I think there's stuff enough for another episode with you. But there's a last question I was thinking of asking you, because are you going to do anything together with Brooklyn Brewery? Like recipes, collabs, stuff like that?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, we are Brooklyn. I mean, we are half Brooklyn, or whatever percent Brooklyn, and I was just talking with Garrett this morning per email. He's in France right now, and so we talk a lot together. So, but if you mean like an official, like on the etiquette where it says Brooklyn EC Dahls, I wouldn't rule it out, to be honest. I could see that happening. I mean, already, for example, we're also brewing, I don't know if it's well known in Norway, but we're brewing Defender, which is Brooklyn IPA. We're brewing it here for Brooklyn for now. I don't know how long it will be brewed outside of Brooklyn, but right now we're brewing it here. And we're really proud of it. And we're really proud because it says, it's all it says is Brooklyn. It looks like a normal Brooklyn bottle in all the different languages. It's imported Sweden, Denmark, everywhere. But there's a little blurb on the label that says brewed by our sister brewery at EC Dahls, Trondheim, Norway. Mm-hmm. We're really proud that they put that on there. And we're really proud that we can brew it for them. But this is also putting Trondheim on the map for, if you're sitting in France and drinking this beer, then you hear about Trondheim. So that's really cool. But yeah, you're right. I think now that you mention it, we should, on our wall, we have like a wall where all the brewers who brewed here signed their name. And we need to get Garrett's name up there, like him physically doing a brew here with us. You're right. I think we should do that.
Yeah, and he should also come and visit us in the podcast.
You know him. He would love to do that, probably. You could probably call him and then have a podcast with him just like this,
We already had Steve Hindi on, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm. Okay, Wolfgang, thanks a lot for taking the time to talk to us. And I really hope we can have you back sometime.
Yeah, Rolf, anytime. It's a pleasure to talk to anybody who's interested in beer, because this is what we are all passionate about. And it's great that there's so many people in Norway passionate about it. And you see it, more and more little breweries. And I wish success to everybody. And all the best. If you need anything, let me know. If you need some help with yeast or some questions, anybody else can send me or send us an email. Yeah, I think you can find us on the back of the BC Dahls bottles too, the email addresses and stuff, or just look it up on the internet. So thanks for supporting us also.
Bjørn, Ivar, Johnsen har vi med oss nå på Skype, stemmer ikke det?
Det stemmer.
Du skal fortelle oss litt om en festival som heter Smaabrygg.
Ja, fikk ideen av av søskenbarnet til samboeren min i fjor, som arrangerer en lignende festival bort på Østlandet, bare i mye mindre format. Så tenkte jeg at jeg måtte få til noe samme hjemme i Flekkefjord på Sørlandet. Da inviterte jeg først noen bekjente ølbryggere og snakket sammen om å få til en liten, egentlig bare en fest for ølbryggere. Dette eskalerte seg veldig fort, og plutselig så hadde vi fått med masse bidragsytere i byen for Flekkefjord. Og så ble det bare til slutt bare en stor fest for hele byen. Fikk påmeldt 45 ølbryggere ganske kjapt første året vi skulle arrangere dette, og solgte rundt 200 billetter da, som vi hadde satt som maks. Det ble utsolgt på 3 dager etter litt markedsføring av det. Det ble en totalt sett så ble det en kjempesuksess. Ikke på å skryte, men jeg tror ikke vi har fått en eneste negativ tilbakemelding etter fjoråret. Og i år så kjører vi på samme opplegget der vi har økt opp antallet bryggere til 62 stykk, og rundt 300 billetter solgt. Og det var utsolgt på 3 minutter før jul. Så det var utrolig moro.
Men dette er altså en ren hjemmebryggerfestival?
Det er ren hjemmebryggerfestival. Så har vi et lite område på siden der vi har skjenkebevilling, for der får vi besøk av diverse bryggerier som kommer og forteller litt om seg selv, og deler ut smaksprøver. Da. Så det blir liksom delt opp i de to, men selve festivalen er basert på hjemmebryggere og hjemmebrygget øl.
Men 62 hjemmebryggere altså, uten å fornærme noen, så er jo ikke Flekkefjord akkurat verdens navle.
Nei, det stemmer det. Vi får besøk av veldig mange fra Kristiansand, noen fra Stavanger og Haugesund. Så har vi faktisk et bryggerlag som reiser helt ned fra Trondheim. Så det er utrolig gøy at vi har blitt hørt så langt av sted.
Ja, for så vidt jeg vet, så er det vel kun de store arrangementene, sånn som Smaabryggs PF og kanskje Juleølfestivalen, som samler så mange hjemmebryggere på en gang.
Ja, tok nok kontakt med de i vinter i forhold til lignende arrangement rundt i Norge, og de påstod at det var et par arrangement som Smaabrygg arrangerte, som var en del større, men de var ganske imponert over hvor mange som faktisk hadde lyst og hadde interesse av å komme ned til Flekkefjord på sånn hjemmebryggerfestival.
Men hvordan er bryggemiljøet i området der du bor? Det virker jo som det kan være ganske aktivt, det da?
Ja, jeg synes det er ganske mange rundt i området som brygger, ikke bare i selve Flekkefjord, men overalt her på Sør-Vestlandet. For fortsatt henvendelser om ølbryggere som har lyst til å komme på Smaabrygg. Jeg har ikke lyst til å si nei til noen, men det har litt med organisering og sånt noe, så det blir litt vanskelig å begynne å tjene enda flere når så nærme festivalen. Men generelt sett, både i Flekkefjord og rundt, så synes jeg det bare blir flere og flere som fatter interesse for hjemmebrygging og starter brygger selv.
Men hva tror du dette skyldes, at det er en så stor interesse i det området?
Litt vanskelig å si, men kanskje mange som har lyst til å prøve noe nytt. Noen tar det kanskje bare som en hobby og blir bitt av basillen. Det er usikkert, men jeg føler jo at festivalen Smaabrygg har hjulpet på å få mange mer litt obs på at det finnes mer enn masseprodusert industriøl.
Ja, det hjelper vel kanskje litt også at i området så finnes det jo en del gode kommersielle bryggerier, sånn type alt fra Nøgnø på den siden oppå til Kvart og til flere i området.
Ja, det er ganske mye rundt nå, og de som vant, som ble kåret til beste ale i fjor på Smaabrygg, de har faktisk startet opp eget bryggeri nå, rett ut forbi byen. Så det er jo moro å se at det bærer frukter.
Ja, dere kjører en konkurranse også. Hvilken type konkurranse er det dere kjører?
Vi har i fjor så var det kun delt i 2 konkurranser, der publikum bestemte alt. Da kårte vi beste ale og beste lager. Så enkelt fordelt. Det ble jo mye større antall ales enn lager. Men vi har endret litt på det i år, så vi har en total publikumsfavoritt, og så kommer vi beste stand, og så har vi fått ned dommere som skal avgjøre på beste IPA, eller India-øl som vi kaller det, så vi kan legge en litt twist på den, og spesialøl.
Men egentlig så burde er det jo ikke noe vits å reklamere for denne festivalen, for den er jo allerede utsolgt.
Det er han, men vi har alltid lyst til å på en måte så har vi ikke lyst til å bli større, for han er så fin som han er nå, men vi har jo lyst til å få med så mange hjemmebryggere som mulig.
Så da tar du sikte på å doble både antall bryggerier og publikummer til neste år da?
Ja, nei, det tror jeg ikke. Det hadde selvfølgelig vært gøy, men som i år også, vi kunne nok solgt mange flere billetter, men ikke bite over for mye på en gang.
Nei, men da tror jeg bare vi skal si at dette er et eksempel til etterfølgelse, det er ikke det?
Jo,
absolutt.
Jeg håper absolutt mange flere vil ta tag i og lage til noe sånt.
Du har lyttet til Vestkast episode 29. Vestkast er støttet av Vestbrygg, vår faste leverandør av utstyr og råvarer til hjemmebrygging. Pingvinen, vår faste pub for godt norsk håndverksøl og god norsk håndverksmat. Og Bergen Craft Beer Fest, Bergens første internasjonale ølfestival i Bergen 19. og 20. mai. Som vanlig står Spacecraft Studio for det tekniske. Denne episoden er laget av Rolf Bergesen.